Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Right, okay, this afternoon, so we're carrying on having a look at new releases and new stuff and things like that. So this is the first of two tastings where the samples have kindly been sent to me by Angus Dundee Distillers, owners of Tom Tool and of course Glencadam, which we're going to be looking at this afternoon. So there's a number of new additions to the range to share with you, and well, I don't really need to go into any detail about the distillery and all that kind of stuff because, well, I've done an episode of the show on Glencadam, I think way back in the distant past. So we'll just basically have a look at this afternoon's little lineup then, shall we? Right, okay, so as I was saying, some new releases. One of them is a no age statement bottling called Origin 1825. Now, for those of you that know the distillery, 1825 was when the distillery was set up. Now, as a few of you are going to go, oh no, not no age statement again, everyone's doing this. And I see so many people complaining about no age statement bottlings. And I suppose some, are, I guess, justified because distilleries are just using up young spirit and maybe vatting in a little bit of older stuff. And but the thing is, when you have a distillery like Glencadam, whose young malt is just incredibly fruity, almost verging on the tropical, very estery, and I love it when it's young. I mean, I love the 10-year-old. So, I mean, I've got no issue with the no age statement. I mean, it's probably got sort of spirit, between 6 and 8 years old, maybe. It's also a case of the cost of a bottle of whiskey is continually going up. I mean, duty, well, no, duty hasn't gone up, but, raw material costs, things like that. So, distilleries are always still trying to keep costs down and looking at getting an entry level malt around about 30 quid, maybe the sub 30 quid, and with all the best will in the world, you're not going to get a 10-year-old whiskey of any real good quality for less than 35, 36 quid retail. So basically means they have no option. If you want to do get a bottle on the shelves that's sort of less than 30 quid, then you're either going to look at a blend or you're looking at a no age statement where the malt is cheaper, or relatively speaking. So I've not got an issue with no age statement bottlings whatsoever, because to me, like I've said a number of times, the age statements are not irrelevant exactly, but too many people focus on that, and what you should focus on is just what is in the glass. Does it taste nice at the end of the day? That's all that matters. Doesn't matter whether it's a 10-year-old, 25-year-old, or 40-year-old, or a no age statement bottling. Same raison d'etre applies. Does it taste nice? Is it a good quality whiskey? And that's all that really matters. So anyway, that little, not really a rant, but just a personal opinion out of the way. So the first one we're going to be looking at is the new no age statement bottling. And then I thought, because we've got a couple of older ones, I'll look at a couple of the current bottlings, just to kind of hopefully give you an idea of how Glencadam develops. So the second bottling we'll be looking at is the standard 10-year-old bottle of 46%, and one of my real favourite whiskies, certainly, if not one of my favourite Highland whiskies, if not one of my favourite whiskies overall. I just love the exuberant fruitiness of Glencadam, and certainly young Glencadam. Then we will move on and look at the 15-year-old, again bottle of 46%, and see how much the oak starts to influence the character of the whiskey, and how that changes the flavour profile. So I think that will be interesting. And then we're going to move on to the second of the brand spanking new releases from the distillery. This is a 19-year-old Oloroso Finished. Now, I'll check before I carry on any further, before I actually get to how long that was actually finished in Oloroso cask. Well, I don't think it was finished for very long at all, but I'll certainly have a look into that before we get there. And finally, we're going to be looking at the majestic 25-year-old with quite a serious price tag, it has to be said. So let's hope that that's worth it. So anyway, so that's this afternoon's little lineup. So let's kick off with the no age statement bottling then. They want you dead. Okay, let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? Fresh, crisp, quite a lot of barley in actual fact, slightly sort of, not raw barley, but that kind of sort of young, dusty kind of barley notes, some lovely sweetness to the barley. It has that sort of semblance of the sort of classic fruity Glencadam character, the estery fruit, a little bit of pineapple, apricot, white fruits, a little bit of spice, just a touch of oak spice. Some quite nice oak beneath it. It's quite robust and rounded. I guess there's a little bit of older spirit here in the background, but it's exuberant, it's pleasant, it's crisp, it's really nice. I think sort of, like I said, I think I've seen it retailing for around about the £30 mark or slightly just under. So, you know, this is certainly, you know, a lovely whisky. Yes, it's got some youth, obviously, but it's not spirity, it's not harsh, it's got that lovely crisp freshness, which is coming from the citrus and a little bit from the minerality. But you can feel, like I said, that sort of weighty, almost tropical Glencadam fruit is definitely there, you know, if it is just sitting slightly in the background. Palate. Again, quite crisp, citric, very citric. Lots of that sort of slightly Alsatian white fruit. A little bit of bittering from the oak, it has to be said, but the weight of fruit and the sort of fleshy apricot and banana and pineapple all kind of sort of like offset that. So it kind of gives it a nice duo dimension, I suppose, for want of a better word. It has that sort of lovely fruitiness, but it has that sort of slight bitterness from the oak, a little bit of citrus as well. It just keeps it sort of like on its toes, shall we say. Medium length, pleasant. Again, like I said, it's youthful. It's not spirity. Again, you can taste there's maybe a smidge of older spirit just sort of underlying all that youthfulness. And this is the key with no age statement whiskies, and with a lot of the really good no age statement bottlings I've tasted. They're not just all about using up younger spirit. Yes, the bulk of the blend will be young spirit, but as everybody knows, you know, you just can't just stick young spirit in a bottle, no matter how good the distillery spirit is, because it will just be too one-dimensional, too young, and you need to give it some layers. And this is where the blender, his skill comes in choosing what other aged malts to sort of add to it to sort of A, keep the price down, but B, to give it sort of like, you know, a lovely all-round character. And well, you know, I think they've definitely succeeded with this. This is absolutely gorgeous, really nice. Moving on to the 10-year-old. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Like I said, one of my favourite 10-year-old whiskies. Lovely, juicy, slightly more herbal notes. Again, sort of that slightly tropical character, pineapple, apricot, sweet barley. That's almost got a rye kind of herbally kind of note coming on, which I'm guessing is probably coming from the oak. Really full, really soft. Just a lovely whiskey. It really is absolutely gorgeous, and still, you know, I mean, it's still, you know, pretty well priced, it has to be said. So a little bit of coffee coming in now, but it's the exuberance of the fruit that really gets me. I just sort of love this kind of style of whiskey, you know. Absolutely fantastic. Palate. Whoa, that fruit is just exploding all over the place. Again, estery, banana-y, soft, full, apricots, a little bit of honey, a little bit of oak, quite a bit of creamy oak in actual fact, but it's all sitting beneath the fruitiness of it. Touch of bitterness on the finish, a little bit of licorice, a little bit of coffee, but again, just all wonderfully balanced, and I love it. Just absolutely fantastic. I just love the sort of huge fruity character. I mean, some bottlings you pick up more fruit on the nose. This one seems to be sort of not quite so much on the nose, but certainly, you know, an awful lot on the palate, and it's just absolutely fantastic. Right, okay, so let's move on to the 15-year-old. Let's see what the nose gives us then, shall we? Still quite herbal, not quite so evocatively fruity. That the fruit is slightly being kept in check by the oak. The oak is a little bit more grainier. There might be a little bit of sherry cask in this. I'm not entirely certain whether they use any sherry cask in that, but it's certainly got that slight sort of sherry spice kind of note. If they do, it's very, very subtle. I certainly don't think it is by the colour, but it certainly has that sort of slightly, like I said, slightly more grainy oak kind of character. Again, I mean, the malt is just really, really fruity, but obviously that additional 5 years is just enclosing it a little bit, but it's still definitely there. It's still got all that estery fruit. It's got a little bit more depth to it, a little bit more maturity. Some of the American oak is starting to become a little dusty, but still predominantly creamy. Yes, you can start to smell the maturity of the American oak. It's just in that sort of phase before it gets into really, really dusty kind of character. It's just at that starting point. A little bit of green citrus, you know, green gage, gooseberry, that kind of thing coming through. Some soft spice, a touch of cinnamon. Maybe a little bit of ginger powder possibly. Oh, that's absolutely gorgeous, and the oak is just developing and becoming more creamy as it stays in the glass. This is fantastic whiskey, absolutely gorgeous. Palate. That's quite a spice fest, it has to be said. Certainly gives you the impression that there's some sherry matured spirit there, with that sort of sherry spicy wood and tannin and licorice, and little dry on the finish, but it's got some lovely spices. Again, that sort of gingery, sort of cinnamony kind of barky spice coming through on the end. Maybe not so hugely fruity, but the fruit is still obviously there. It's still got some lovely depth to it. Some lovely creamy oak coming through now right on the very end. Absolutely gorgeous. Just amazing the difference between the two bottlings in just 5 years. That's what 5 years will do for it. But you know, that's good. Right, okay, so let's move on to the 19. Now, I did have a quick look and I couldn't find out how long this was finished in Oloroso casks. Don't seem to have that note to hand, but anyway, doesn't matter. Let's just see what the note gives us then, shall we? It just takes on from the 15. It's got that absolutely gorgeous dusty American oak character. with a little bit of sherry spice. So I'm guessing it's not spent a huge amount of time, maybe sort of 2, maybe 3 years. It's a possibility that all the vatting wasn't finished in Oloroso. Could well be, you know. Certainly not unheard of to just finish a proportion of the vatting in sherry and then putting it all back together for a final marrying period. Wonderfully juicy. Those of you that know and that follow the or buy the Whisky magazine will know that in the latest release of or the latest copy of the magazine, this was editor's choice, and of course obviously they all get tasted blind. I haven't got a clue what it is, but you know, so absolutely stunningly good, it has to be said. Beautifully dusty again. It's kind of taken the 15-year-old and it's just amplified it. It's got more spice, more green fruit, more citrus, more dusty oak. Oh, that's absolutely beautiful, really amazing. And the longer you leave it in the glass, the less the sherry influence actually comes through. And I remember when I first tasted this, I didn't pick up the sherry whatsoever because I kind of poured it, left it, and it settled, and I was just getting all this lovely old American oak coming through. Oh, it's just absolutely gorgeous, but it's still got sort of a lovely verve and a bit of intensity. Like I said, quite spicy and aromatic, a little bit herbal. It's just absolutely fantastic. And then all that juicy fruit still underneath, that little bit of acacia honey. It's just one of those sort of whiskies you just keep sniffing and sniffing and sniffing. But I've got to get on to the 25-year-old palate. Oh, that lingers. That is gorgeous. Again, it opens up with a lot of American oak, creamy American oak, dusty American oak, mature American oak, some lovely sort of soft sherry spices on the finish with a little bit of dried fruit. Again, lovely depth of mature tropical pineapple, apricot, and honey, and oh, spices on the finish are absolutely fantastic, and it's just got a lovely balance to it, lovely balance of vibrancy. It's just so harmonious. The Oloroso finishing is not too heavy. It just kind of like comes through on the finish, adding that little bit of spiciness, and that's just how it should be. Absolutely how it should be. I really, as you know, do not like anything that's just been blasted by sherry cask at all, because it's just completely and utterly unbalanced. But when you sort of use it just to add a nuance, a little bit of, you know, a little bit of spiciness, a little bit of dried fruit, you know, all that kind of stuff, that's how you handle sherry, and that is very good. And finally, on to the last of the new releases, the 25. Let's see what this is going to give us then. Oh, now if you thought the 19 was good, this is even better. This is just 100% old American oak. It's dusty, it's mature, but it's still got some vibrancy. It's still got some citrus notes, some herbal notes. Fruit is all very, very subtle, but you know, giving it some nice body and some weight. Touch of violet now with coming through, and that lovely old American oak. Absolutely gorgeous. Slightly creamy, a little bit of creaminess coming through, but it's just all about the luscious fruit and the big oak, and again, just wonderfully harmonious, just really, really well balanced. Now this I could sniff all day, but I've got to finish this episode of the show off. Palate. American oak spice on the finish. Oh, it's just wonderfully soft and honeyed. Like I said, a little bit of acacia honey. Wonderfully mature and dusty American oak. Again, still loads and loads and loads of fruit. It's just so harmonious. And you know, if this can last for 25 years, I would imagine they would certainly quite easily bottle a 30, 35, possibly even a 40-year-old. I don't think that's beyond the realms for Glencadam. It just seems to retain its fruit. You know, it's not dried out or hollow or all oaky. You know, it's just absolutely stunning. A little bit of white chocolate now. Really complex. Some lovely citrus notes. A little bit of that sort of Highland kind of granity kind of note right on the finish. Just absolute sublime. Very, very good and damn worth it. Okay, so let's sum up this week's episode of the show. Glencadam, brilliant distillery. I mean, you know, everything in the range is absolutely fantastic. I mean, I've had issues with maybe one or two bottlings over the years. I think it was the portwood finish that I just didn't think quite worked particularly well. But you know, that's the way these things go. I mean, for no age statement, sub 30 quid, 1825 Origin. You could do a lot worse. That's all I can say. That is an absolutely gorgeous whiskey, and the key to it working is that Glencadam is such a fruity whiskey, and they could probably get away with bottling it 3 years old, for God's sake. I mean, it might be a little bit on the raw side, but you know, it's such an estery, fruity malt that it's just kind of gives so much, and that fruit character just carries on and is retained, you know, throughout its entire life. And yes, a little bit more oak kind of creeps in, but never seems to overpower or unbalance the whiskey. 10-year-old I'd still think is an absolute bargain. It's probably, like I said, it's mid-30s. If you're after a safe style, in inverted commas, it's almost always one of my go-to whiskies. I mean, so some people that don't like the big tropical fruit, you know, they don't like that. They're not keen on things like Arran and stuff like that. But you know, it's a crowd pleaser. It is just a lovely whiskey. 15-year-old is just starting to show that sort of little bit of maturity, that sort of slight sort of dusty American oak. If there's a little bit of sherry cask vatted in, it just adds that sort of little bit of spiciness. But even if there isn't, it's just such a just a really, really nice whiskey. The 19-year-old Oloroso Finish, again, just a very, very nice whiskey. A classic example of how to finish a whiskey in Oloroso. Not to overpower it with the sherry character, just add that spicy nuance, that dried fruit character. It's just absolutely spot on, it has to be said. And the 25, well, you know, we're not all going to have deep pockets to be able to afford a bottling of that ilk, but if you do have that kind of spare cash, then you know you can do a lot worse than pick up a bottle of that, because that is absolutely stunning. And again, like I said, just continues to keep its fruit. It's still wonderfully slightly tropical, but you get more dusty American oak, more I could go on about that for ages, but yeah, there you go. So that's this week's episode of the show in the bag. I hope you enjoyed it. Next week we'll be looking at a couple of the new releases from the sister distillery, Tomintoul. So until then, good afternoon and good dram.